He may come up first. Well, what time does the 10 o'clock meeting start?
This is Hawaiian time.
What time's our 10 o'clock meeting start? 10:05.
Chad, are we ready?
Okay. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I want please note that we have temporary speakers, microphones, temporary speakers. Sam's a temporary speaker. Thanks to our convention center and Sam, they came to the rescue to provide us with our audio. So if you would, please speak into the mics with the colored band on them. And with that, we start off with a roll call vote.
Where's the meeting?
I mean, a roll
the
call.
meeting down here.
Meeting, what do you mean by meeting?
Don't we?
Where? Here, you.
Whitus,
Here.
Fenton, Buckley,
Is that me?
Buckley,
Here.
Pinkley,
Here.
Yancey. Here. Romine,
Here.
Denham, Milton,
Here.
Dobbins. Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll move on to the regular agenda. First item is approval of the Finance Committee minutes from the February 10th, 2022 joint meeting and March 3rd, 2022 regular meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Next will be a presentation of our regular reports from Jamie. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Mayor and Finance Committee. We're going to go over the sales tax reports today, and remember, these are February receipts, but they are December sales, so this will complete the actual sales month for 2021. So if you look, you see that for the month for February, it was 1.3 million, which is a 43% increase, 43.5, should I say, increase over 21. And you can look over the past months, and you can see that 1.3 is the highest for the month over that 10-year period. Also for the 2.5 for year to date, it's the same thing all across the 10-year period. And one thing, and I'm probably redundant on this, and I just want to paint that correct picture for you. Remember, when you're looking at the tax receipts coming in, you also have to look at the other side of it, the inflation and some of the things that are occurring in our economy right now. So while, yes, the receipts are good, no questions asked, there's no questions that the receipts are good. We're thankful for the way they're coming in. You also have to look at the inflation and the costs and the fuel and all of that stuff rising up that could be some direct link to it. So I just wanted to put that out there just to keep you thinking about that going forward. So that's the sales tax. That's your 1% sales. The next one is your 0.5% tourism tax. Transportation tax. For the year to date, it's at 35.6%. And the same logic still applies to all of these tax reports. The next one is your public safety sales tax, and you're at 35% increase for year to date, which is a $1.2 million. And then for your tourism, remember, they're only 1 month. This is still December actual sales, but January receipts because they come in at the end of January. So what you're looking at here is a 62.7% increase for receipts over last year. And again, look all the way across that 10-year history, and you can see those receipts are the higher than we've ever received at this point. And then the next one is your classification breakdown for your tourism, and it gives you all the categories: your amusements, your theaters, your hotel motels, campgrounds, nightly rentals, restaurants and concessions, etc. And then you can see how well each one of those are doing in those categories according to the amount of receipts that we receive. Any questions so far?
Jim,
Okay.
I just wanted to point out,
Sure.
these are December receipts.
Yes, sir. They're
So if we look at theaters, a 91% increase, which would reflect our Christmas season, right?
Yes, their
That-
actual sales occurred during December. Sure thing.
It's very, very impressive, and I am glad to see that number for theaters.
Yeah.
They really suffered, I think, the most through the whole COVID
Yeah.
shutdown.
Yes, and hotels and motels too, they're coming back. You can see that as well.
Motels, they use that, yeah.
Yes.
I
The other
did wear my
thing-
Christmas colors today, so it's right around the corner.
The other thing about the theaters too, what I found is they were open later in December than they have been in previous years. And, I mean, I know at Tanger, it was our best December on record for traffic and sales. But I think the theaters saw the traffic too, because I know some of them were just adding shows, and I think that really helped with that too.
You could sure see that visually too. If you hung around in December, there was so much more traffic well past the 10th. You know, it was quite something to see. The next one is your rolling 12s reports. And then the first one, if you recall, these are your monthly tax receipts. And these are put back into the month in which the sales occurred. So what we receive, we go back and put back into the actual accrual month. And you can see that at 1.1 million for the November, which is a 21.7% growth. And the next report reflects actual sales, and what we do is we do that calculation and we divide it by 1% so you can see what the actual sales occur. So as of November, you're looking at 1.4 billion. And that's for the entire city, and that's the sales as they reflect of what we receive. Okay? We'll keep moving, trying to leave a little bit of time because we have our convention center presentation toward the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to just stop me. The next one is, this is our not restricted to TIF payments, and this kind of shows you that outside of your TIF payments, the rest of the area of the city and what we're doing. And you can see that for the sales tax, we had $501,000 increase over last year. So that's a good reflection on the rest of the city and how well they're doing. And the next one is the same, but it's regarding tourism. And so this is net of TIF. You actually have a $576,000 increase there as well. So once again, I want to let you know that is those receipts are definitely good, but we just need to keep in mind what's going on in the markets and stuff. And the markets may just jump back and surprise us all. So that would be a great thing too. So I just kind of want to paint the whole picture, right? Okay. Next one, please. Thank you. And this is the report, the budget report. So this is one that we've created over a 5-year history. And the reason why we do this report, just really quickly, I know most of you already know this, but the reason why we do this report is because we are such a highly tourism-generated city. And it's not just a straight line over 12 months. You can't really kind of get the feel for where we really are at. So we created this report to show you that over the history of 5 years, you can see what percentage by month is supposed to come in, and then you can rate where it's coming in at according to the percentage based on a 5 years average. So right now, as we stand year to date, 2022, the 1% sales tax, you still have an increase over what we anticipated in the budget of 15.7%. So that is a really good reflection. Again, we are conservative in nature. We weren't 100% sure of where we were going to go with the economics and stuff. I don't think anybody in our country was, but that's still a good reflection on where we're sitting right now.
Jamie, would
Yes,
you
sir.
remind us, when we're comparing this to our budget number, do you remind us real briefly of what percentage of increase you factored in for 22 compared to 21?
Yes, sir. That's a good question. So the budget was 11.8 million, and we reflected, we wanted to start coming back. Usually we do it like a conservative, like over 1%, if we think that's a reasonable number. But if you remember, we wanted to start stair-stepping it back up from the pandemic. And so I did not do that calculation. I want to say we took it back to 2019, close to 2019's numbers, without a percent increase, but I'll calculate that for you just to let you know. I'm sorry, I should have thought about that, but I didn't.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I want to say it was around 20%, but I'm not sure of that, so I'll let you know.
Thank you.
And then really the same thing for tourism. So you can see the $13.1 million budget there that was put into the budget for 2022. And as we stand right now for January's receipts, we're 48.8% above where we anticipated based on a 5-year average. The idea behind it all was the pandemic kind of put a little bit of a skew into what we were doing and how we were doing it. So we needed to reflect back on the market, really pay attention to the economic forecast, and really go back into all of the benchmarks that we look at and try to determine, are we going to be able to get back to 2019 numbers? I believe we are. I believe we'll probably do better than that. But there are other factors that weigh on that, such as, and I talk about that a lot, but inflation really has an impact on some of that. So we just got to keep that in mind when we're going forward. Okay. If y'all are ready to move on, I will move on to the general fund. And this is the general fund as of the end of February, and you can see we're at $4.4 million in total revenue, and then for the general fund. And in 2021, we were right at $4 million, so we're still trending up. It reflects on our sales tax as well. And you can see the categories right there and how well we've done or haven't done. And right now, our interest income is still holding at an increase, which is good. And I expect that number to start coming up too because the interest rates are moving on up. So you'll start seeing that number grow as well. You can look at the expenditures. We've got almost 1.2 million there, and it was a little less than 1.3. So right now our expenditures at our decrease as of February over 21, and you can see in 2020 how that works as well. Okay, so we'll move down to the other financing sources, and remember the other financing sources are your transfer ins and your transfer outs, and you have a lot of the subsidies from the general fund that go out maybe to your debt service or your subsidy to your police station or your subsidy to your parks. All of those are reflected in your other financing sources. And we did, if you remember, we did move the subsidies back up to 100%. So the police and the parks will both be back up full to 100%. And then right now, oh, sorry. I keep trying to touch the screen and move it. It's crazy. Okay, so the unreserved balance for the general fund is at $13.3 million as of the end of February currently. Any questions there so far? Y'all are so quiet today. Okay, next one is Public Safety Fund. Remember, this is a combination of the police and fire funds, and we accumulate that because it is public safety tax. It's generated, it's one tax, but we separate it for internal purposes. But at the end of the year, we have to bring it back to one fund. So that's why we show you the summary, and then we show you the breakdown on both. You have total revenues of $1.2 million versus 2021. You have $942,000 in 2020 was $1 million. One thing I'll say about 2020 is remember, COVID didn't really start impacting us until the end of March in 2020. So that's where you'll see these reflections of these numbers, okay? In round about July, you'll start seeing a different story here with 2020. Your expenditures on your public safety tax, your expenditures are a little less than 1.6 million. You've got a little more than 1.6 for 2021 and 1.7 for 2020. And you can see those numbers reflected there, and we'll go through the breakdown here in just a second. The other financing sources, again, you can see the transfer in from your general fund, that's back up to the 7.6 million as we talked about. The operating out to capital projects at 1.5 million. That's for the fire department. That's to move the monies over for the fire station, if you recall. And then you've got the $250,000, and that's for their vehicles. You still have, as of February, the code enforcement, $163,000, and you'll see that start to go away as the code enforcement has now changed. Okay, so unreserved fund balance for public safety combined, was $10.1 million. And then we'll go down through the breakdown of it so that you can see the police and fire. Okay, so on the summary, you'll see the 21 and the 2020. We didn't start actually breaking them down until about mid-year last year, so you've lost a little bit of history there. That'll come back as we get forward, and you'll have some history from 2021 on the individual funds themselves, if that makes sense to y'all. So the total revenues right now are at $701,979 for police, and your expenditures are at $972,000. You can scroll down and keep in mind, we also, for the interest income, you can see that up there on the revenues. You can see that we also invest by fund. So each fund will have their interest income based on their allotment and the weighted average here. Okay. Here you go, your total other financing sources. That is your transfer in from the general fund. That's at 7.6. Broken down into the 55-45 weighted average percentage. That's what for police. And again, you'll see that code enforcement amount coming from 163,717. That was the budget, but that will change. Total unreserved balance for police at this moment at the end of February is $4.9 million. The next one is your fire department, and total revenues are $570,000. And you can see their expenditures are at $627,640. And if you scroll down, you can see the other financing sources, and that's your other piece, your transfer in from the general fund. There is the amount that we're moving to capital for the fire station. You can see that as well. So their unreserved fund balance as of the end of February is $5.2 million.
So Jamie,
Yes, sir.
I understand that where the funds are for the fire station, do we have funds, are we setting aside funds for the police department? New police department?
No, we're not. The plan for that is to do a financing plan on that. Go out and get some financing of 20 years. We got to do that quickly if we're going to do it, though, because your tax sunsets, and you can't borrow against tax. That's not a sure thing. So you have to do it within that 20 years. So we have not yet made that plan, but we are looking to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, in April at the study session, the police department, the engineering department, and the finance department have been tasked with bringing the funding plan to you all at the study session for April.
Very
And I
nice.
would encourage the finance committee to attend if they could.
Thank you.
One thing I will note is just keep in mind, we have not yet looked at or had a plan yet for how we're going to staff that fire station when it gets fully built. I just wanted to throw that out there so it doesn't come as a surprise. And I know I say it all the time, so it shouldn't, but I just wanted to make sure I keep repeating that. So it's right up front and center. Okay, the next one is, did I mention the fund balance is about $5.2 million in the fire? So we'll keep moving. You're going to hear the report from the convention center today. So I'll move through this one quickly. Just let me know if you have any questions. Total revenues are at $418,995 versus 21 was $355,092, and 2020 was $404,000. Your expenditures are at $713,783 versus 2021 was $587,889, and 2020 was at $797,190. Your total fund balance for the convention center at the end of February was $283,686. The next one is your tourism tax. This is a look at your tourism taxes of the end of February. Little more than $2 million in revenue, and you have 1.3 in 2021, and then you have 1.5 in 2020. And then for your expenditures, you have 1.4 million in expenditures. One thing I do want to note is you see that budget dollar amount under principal where it's 9 million. When we put together the budget for 2022, we were anticipating paying off that $7 million COP loan in the 2022 budget. And thanks to y'all and the board, we were able to do that in December, and it saved quite a bit of money just through that 6-month time period. So that's why you're going to see the approved budget says the 9 million in it, but we're not going to use that 9 million because we did a budget amendment and paid it off in December. Does that make sense? Okay.
Was that the, was that the loan from the tourism tax to the general fund for 76?
That was, yes, sir. That was we took out originally a $12 million loan and we had $7 million to pay off. We paid it off in December instead of this June, and we saved, I think, a little more than $200,000 doing it that way through interest. And you can see the principal, the 1.3, that was the last payment against the tourism for the debt. So tourism is debt-free right now, which is good. So I think that's something to be happy about.
That's very good.
Yes.
So Jamie, just another point, unless I'm mistaken or whatever, but that being able to pay that off was flow through from the SID that's in place for the.
No.
No.
That is not.
No, the tourism tax came back. So the as of like 2017, if you recall, we kind of depleted that reserve and we didn't have much left. And so through some really good decisions that were made, there were we had to eliminate a lot of the capital projects going forward to try to build that up. And thankfully, you can see right now, even after paying off the $7 million loan payment and after paying off the last debt service, you're still sitting at $17.2 million. So I think it's safe to say that that has come back quite well, and now you're sitting in a really good spot moving forward with the tourism funds. But did I answer your question? Because I think I chased a rabbit there. Okay. This is the transportation sales tax at 1.3 million in 2022 versus 21 was 998,439, and 2020 was 1.1 million. And your expenditures there at 463,880 versus 378,586 in 21, and 393,405 in 2020. And then your other financing sources, you can see what those are that transfer in from the tourism. You can see the, which hasn't occurred yet, you can see the TIF, those outsources, and the debt that we pay. All of those are outlined right there for you. And as of the end of February, are 515,714 versus 402 versus 423 the year before. You're sitting at an unreserved fund balance for the transportation fund of about 5.6 million. One thing I should note too is keep in mind those beginning balances, those are once we roll the year, those are unaudited numbers. They are subject to change. However, we don't anticipate them to change very much, okay? We are in the middle of that process. Here's your debt service. This is what your debt service will look like. We'll go through that. This is just monies moving out from those certain funds that we've already talked about in here in order to pay the debt service, and the TIF debt really is what we have left. And your reserve fund balance, I shouldn't say unreserved, your reserve fund balance here is 20.4 million in that debt. The next one is your 160 fund. And remember, this was, used to be the Meadows Fund, and then it went to the specific bond issue against this. You're at $4.1 million in the reserve, and that's your debt service reserve for that bond. And then this is your capital projects fund. And then you can see right there the transfer in from the public safety for the fire station. So what we do on the capital projects is we create a project number. Everything that's for those major capital projects goes into this fund. And then when you expend those monies and the construction and all of that begins, it'll come directly out of this fund, okay? The next major one is your Parks and Rec Fund. And for total revenues for February, you're at $186,939 versus 21, you're at $164,058, and 2020, $170,527. And you can look at the expenditures. It's a little bit hard to gauge at this point in time in the year. Not as much going on. It'll start to tick up around about May and June. Okay, so there's your expenditures at $336,285 and $314,606 and 21 and $305,363 and 20. And your unreserved fund balance is $1.5 million there in the Parks Department. One thing I do want to say about that is typically, once we have those audited figures and those numbers, if you recall, the reserve balance for the parks per code is 10% of your operating expenditures. So what we like to do every year is we like to calculate how much we can roll over into her internal service fund from the fund balance that's left over. So you can see by that fund balance right there, she's going to have quite a bit of money that Cindy and her staff is going to have quite a bit of money to roll over from their operating funds into their internal service fund, and that will really, really help them be able to manage their assets quite a bit better. In fact, I think this is the largest, since I've been here, that's the largest amount we're going to be able to move, which would be a blessing.
And when you said an increase for them to manage their funds, I'm assuming there's some capital improvements built into that?
Yes, and with this one, she will be able to better manage, so she won't have to say, you know, where am I operating? It's more like a savings account. You have your savings account now built up, so you have a little bit of extra money if you need it for things like air conditioners that break and, you know, God forbid, like floods or something that we have to take care of right now. Those are the things that internal service money will be a little bit more flexible, and she'll be able to manage that.
Specifically, I was looking for Cindy to have the ability to have some capital for improvements in our neighborhood parks.
And that internal service fund, you can use it for if that's the priority.
Excuse me, are you a Hall of Fame?
Thanks for that. We have been talking about that. I've talked to Jamie about it several times too. There is a grant that we'd like to pursue for a new inclusive playground at one of our parks that we've been looking at. So having the money to kind of match that grant would be great. And I think that, you know, we were grateful this past year to get 8 or 10 small capital projects that we're working on right now. A lot of them maintenance related, like our fire panel or our pool grates. The biggest one would be Cantwell Park, which we're working on right now. But there's definitely some improvements in some of our neighborhood parks. I know that's a focus that and Stan's mentioned it many times, that he would love to see those improvements happen. So that would be something that we would really like to utilize that for, because while those requests are part of next year's capital budget, we're not assured of funding in the capital budget. So, you know, I guess the process, Jamie, would just be to create that project and develop the cost or go to bid and then bring that to the Finance Committee for consideration.
Yeah, and with the internal service fund.
Jamie?
Sorry. Yes, and with the internal service fund, it allows you a little bit more flexibility to be able to do that. That's the whole purpose, is to build that fund up so they have a little bit more flexibility to maintain and even get ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy.
The next one is your water sewer fund at 620. Okay, you're looking at your total revenues of $1,697,263 versus 2021, $1,074,515, and 2020, $1,332,824. As of the end of February, consumption was down, but remember we did a 2% water increase and a 7% sewer for this year. So those are reflected in those numbers as well. Here's your expenditures, $1.8 million for 2022. And 1.9 for 2021 and 1.9 for 2020. And then the unreserved fund balance is 65.6 million, and I want to, hang on one second, I will take you to the balance sheet so that you can see. Okay, so cash and investments out of that 65,624, 9,137,910. Okay, out of that 65 million, the 9,137,910 is what you have available. Okay? And then this is your large capital fund for water sewer, and you have about a $4.4 million reserve in that. And then your water sewer fund. Now, remember when I say capital funds, most of those reserves are for capital projects. They're already spoken for, or those are projects that maybe have been put on the back burner but they're still earmarked in some way. Now, there are some projects that money was moved over there for that maybe are not going to be done, or that there's not a need for those again. And so you'll have some money in that reserve balance that you will be able to use.
Jamie, would you remind us where we are with the Compton sewer plant? Last I heard, I think we were short $3 million, but we had a way, we were looking at receiving that $3 million?
Yes, sir. And so we've been working back and forth. So we had completely approved the 10.7, and we were looking at the 3.5 million, the difference. And we've gone back and done a budget amendment. We haven't received a written approval yet, but I believe we've received, a verbal, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. So I think for the Compton, you're going to get that completely paid for through grants.
So we're optimistic of the additional 3.5.
Yes, sir, we are very.
And you know what the timing is on that?
That is a good question. I don't know what the timing is, but I can certainly find out. We have meetings like every 2 weeks, so we haven't gotten that written, and so I'm hesitant to say until we have that written response. But yeah, I'll find out for you, sure, certainly.
And this is probably not in your world, but where are we at with architectural, our drawings? What's the next step to move that forward?
I see Kendall coming up
Yeah.
here. He's better to
Come on,
speak on
Kendall.
operations than I am.
Good morning.
Hi.
So right now we're underway with our final design. So HDR is working through that. The first part of it was working through the Liberty Utilities gate rise potential anyway. So they worked through a hydraulic study there for us, helped us with a comment letter to make sure that we didn't need to adjust the design based off of the findings of their hydraulic study. So right now they're underway with final design at this point. So the projected to be finished with that is sometime around in July. And then at that point, we'll go out for bid for contractors and hopefully be underway sometime by the end of the year, around November, with construction. So,
If you don't mind, you raised a good question. On the raising of the gates and the effect of that on Compton, on our treatment plant, I raised the question earlier regarding Lakewood Estates. At a homeowners meeting, there was no concern from the homeowners of raising the pool level, if you will, up a foot. The concern was by raising it a foot, and this would be a same question for the sewer treatment plant, by raising that up a foot, is there going to be any impact on an additional foot of when it's flooding? Because I'm assuming that's what you're looking at for Compton.
that is correct, yes. So in our meeting, and Keith can maybe speak more to this, but I know in our meeting with Liberty, we discussed their operational approach. For example, when we know weather's coming in, and they run the lake at a certain height, right, for
Yep.
generating power, plus keep the pool of water up to a certain level for recreation and things like that nature. They operate at a certain level, and it fluctuates. Taneycomo goes up and down. So there's a set defined level that the 100-year floodplain is determined off of. So that, again, we're basing our wall off that 100-year floodplain, right? So in our discussions with them was, what can Liberty do with their operational plan to help us with those tributary flows that come ahead of Table Rock Dam releases, right? So generally what we see is the tributary flows come in, starts raising Lake Taneycomo up. And then if you looked at historical graph numbers, typically those tributaries have a chance to drain down before Table Rock starts releasing. Now, for example, in 2015, when we were within inches of coming over the Compton Drive berm, the flows coming out of Table Rock was much higher much lower than in 2017. In 2017, Table Rock release was much higher, but the tributaries had a chance to drain down quick enough. Power site
Yep.
got their lake level dropped down quick enough that it made room for Table Rock release to come through. So the big thing is making sure that Liberty's on board with making sure that the lake level gets down to where it relieves enough capacity to handle those tributary flows and the Table Rock flows as they come through. So.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to take away time from the topic of the budget. Bottom line is, if you would keep this board and the Board of Aldermen updated with the effect on Compton with these gates, because that will be the exact same effect on Lakewood Estates.
Yep, certainly.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's my same thoughts, thank you.
Okay, the next ones are the internal service fund, excuse me, sorry. The next ones are the internal service funds, and we'll just walk through what's in the balance for those. Keep in mind that our vehicle leases come out of this as well. So $908,000 in the water sewer operating internal service fund at this point in time. You can keep scrolling. There's your police at 602. That's your fund number. And you have an unreserved fund balance of $533,800. Keep in mind, like I said, the vehicle lease will come out of that as well. Same thing for the Parks Department. Right now you have $148,725. Transportation, you have about $145,773. In your general fund, right now, you have $149,167. And those make up your internal service funds. And as you can see, we're starting to accumulate, and which is a really good thing for the city. What was that one? Did I miss one? This is fire? Sorry about that. Fire, you can see, is a little bit more than $500,000. Okay. And that's just the accumulated total of the water, sewer, and the their capital funds. You can keep scrolling up. The next financial reports. And this will be, we talk about this quite a bit. This is your cash by fund report and your balance sheets. So when I tell you all the time, you can check me by looking at your income statement, looking at the fund balance for your income statement, tying it back to your balance sheet, making sure those two agree. And then you can tie your balance sheet back to the cash by fund report for the cash. And so that should give you some assurance that what we're reporting to you by fund is actually what we have in the bank as well. So you can see that this is our main operating cash by fund report. You can see all the funds that are included in that. We have a separate one. You can keep scrolling up. We have a separate one for tourism, and then we have a separate one for the public safety as well. And then that should tie back to your balance sheets. Keep in mind, there are two funds that don't completely tie back to the balance sheets, and that's because of those minor funds. That will be the general fund and your public safety, which is really just your police. So the general fund also has the court fund, which is 102 fund, and it's got about 5,106 in it. And then there's the safety fund that we get for the safety dollars. That's also wrapped up in the general fund, and that's 42,000. So that'll be your difference. And then for your police fund, you have your inmate security, you have your police training, you have your forfeiture fund, and your canine fund. All of those are minor funds, but they all roll back up into your police fund. And so that amount is $149,357, and you'll be able to get back to your fund balance if you add those in. So those are the two, and that's how you can really just check us, okay? The next reports that we're looking at, these are just your informational reports, and this is really just to keep you more informed of what we do. Right now, the business license is, up and running, and the season is really at us, so you'll see the business license classification and what we have. You may have to go out of this one Sunday to get into those other information reports. No? Yeah, there it is. I'm sorry. She did remind me of something that I missed. We started adding the 76 CID income statement, and I did not talk about that. But it is in your reports, and I should pull that up. Here it is. Do you have that? There you go, sorry. 917,490. And this is for the CID and that 1 cent sales tax. And so I think we had a request several months ago because we weren't bringing it before you because we present it to the CID board, but it really makes sense to just show you what's out there and what we're up against. So the total revenues is 917,000 versus in 21 you had 565, 977. And then in 2020 you had 87,000. And remember, since then we've annexed that whole thing and you'll see that money start coming in. We budgeted to receive 3.8 million, but I believe in 2021 received about more than 4.5 million. So you can see where that's coming. And then your expenditures right now are at 26,521 versus 3,908. The expenditures really haven't gotten up and running, but they will because the project's really on the move. So you can see that capital undergrounding, and you can see that transfer out to tourism on this report. That's the money that they are paying us back over a period of time for that $9.2 million. Right now, as of the end of February, you have 5.7 million in the reserve balance there. I apologize for missing that one. And then we are talking about your informational reports. There's your business license. We also keep you up to date on the RFPs and the requests for bids and the qualifications that we send out. And to date, this is your business license if you want to scroll down to the next. There you go. Those are the RFQs and RFPs and RFBs that we've sent out so far. The next one is just really your consumption report. Again, we put it out there for your information so that you can see the consumptions, where they are, what we're doing through the procurement process, what we're doing through business license. They're just really for informational purposes only. Okay. And then the next one is your disbursements, I believe. And is there any questions on this? There are two. There are January and February's. Both of them are out there. So you can see those, and we will need an approval for those.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this financial report. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Thank you. The next one is your project status report. Again, this is the two projects, the downtown and the 76 project. It's really just to keep you involved and being able to see where we're at this moment. You can see that in 2021, we spent a little more than 1.2 million on the project, and that was the undergrounding. And we've not really done a whole lot this year for it. So you can see the total right now, 76 project cost to date was a little more than 24 million so far. The next one, we have a utilities budget amendment discussion. And one thing I want to say before we get started with all of this is what we're up against right now is, and I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but what we're up against right now is we're up against cost increases. So we may have budgeted, like you're going to see right now, we may have budgeted 290,000 for something. We think that's a reasonable budget, but the bids, they're coming in much higher, and we're seeing that all across the city, as probably you are in your businesses. So that's kind of where we're at in these budget amendment discussions. And one thing I do want to point out with this budget amendment is that Kendall and his staff, they looked at it, they saw that this is a need, they saw the budget, and they saw the amount that we were going to have to come up with, and they found it within their own budget, within another capital piece that they had. They saved money on one and are able to take that money and put it to this to offset it, so it's not going to come out of a reserve. So I think that's really good. It's really good financial management on the director's part when they're able to do that instead of us having to bring budget amendments and it's just continuously coming out of the reserve. I wanted to point that out because this is a good picture of this is not something that has to come out of the reserve. This is a way they found savings in one of their already approved capital and are able to use that savings for this cost overrun. I'll let Kendall explain what this is to you, but I wanted to mention that because as a finance committee level, that's what we would expect. And I think it's really working, and I think they understand it, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to recap a little bit over what Jamie had just said as well. But so the Utilities Department is, requesting a budget adjustment for two 2022 approved capital items, which are scheduled replacement of two wastewater tank trucks. These tank trucks include are units 212 and unit 276. Are used for the transport of liquid biosolids to the regional drying facility and various other pumping needs in the city's wastewater system. Both vehicles have reached the end of their optimum use. Unit 212 has a total of 246,000 miles as of February this year, and Unit 276 has a total of 139,000 miles as of February of this year. Both vehicles have reached maximum replacement score, and I can get into a little bit more details on that here in a minute. Bids were received on March 1st and March 2nd of this year. Only one bid was received from Crump Truck and Trailer Works for the pump truck tank assembly in the amount of $13,170.76. And the other bid of the cab and chassis from Rush Tank Center, formerly Summit Truck Group, in the amount of $122,822 per unit. And the total price for all was a bid of $347,105. And I think I skipped over the new pump tank assembly amount of $88,291 and some change. So funds were budgeted in the amount of $290,000 for both units. The budget adjustment is being requested for the difference of $57,105.81. We are proposing adjusting the funds from our small capital 146 account to the vehicle 620 account, both of which are funded by water and sewer rates. We have identified the savings of approximately $300,000 from an approved 146 capital item, which is our Walmart water tower renovation project. Originally, we budgeted $550,000 for this capital item, but identified an approach which will spread the cost over a 5-year period. And I'll touch base on that a little bit. So we have, in the past, we kind of experimented with 2 different towers of running it through a what's called a tower maintenance program. And instead of paying for the tower renovation, which is complete sandblasting of the exterior and interior fixing of any kind of deficiencies and coating the exterior and interior all in one shot, instead of paying for that all in the same year, we took an approach of spreading it out across like a 5-year period. We have a tower maintenance contractor that proposed that to us, and it could be basically it's a renewable contract from year to year. And so we renewed that contract from year to year, paid for the renovation over a period of time there, and then if we kept that contract going, then the annual fee drops down to just a maintenance fee. And as long as we keep the annual contract going with that, and once we reach, say, like a 10-year period, and the tank needs repainted again, they're responsible for repainting the tank and recoating it and everything. And we actually, through some numbers that we done earlier this year, studied into it that we could save half the cost of the next painting by keeping that maintenance contract going on. So we're trying to look, instead of just at the near now, we're trying to look out ahead and see what ways we can not only save us some money, but also ensure that we have a way of keeping up with tower maintenance. As you've seen, last year we had 2 emergency purchases, one for the Walmart tower and one for our Pacific tower. Again, those towers went a long time without any kind of internal maintenance. So what we're going to propose to you later on this year is bringing to you a tower maintenance contract for all of our towers, not just Walmart. But Walmart would be the one that we'd start with this year and renovate, because obviously it's got a dire need there along with our landmark tower, and spread these out over like a 8-year period of staggering, adding more towers to the contract as we go from year to year, and then continue on with the maintenance so that we have a contractor on board that can keep up with this stuff, and they're responsible for any kind of coating replacements or patchings or anything like that. We won't have emergency repairs or emergency purchase memos from here on out if we go with this route, because we'll have somebody under contract and responsible for taking care of that. And then it helps set our rates, balance our rates out, because we know what the costs are going to be at from year to year to year to year. So that's so through that, we're able to save approximately $300,000 from the numbers what we're seeing for this year. So we want to utilize those dollars to cover for the increase in costs that we're seeing for this capital item. Again, these trucks, one's a 2012 model. That's the one that's got the little over 100,000 miles on it, 130,000 miles on it. This truck, year to date, we've spent over $86,000 in maintenance on. It's an international truck. It's an engine that had a lot of issues, and it's actually down right now again. That we're going to have to spend money on to repair it just to get us by, because these chassis aren't available until next summer. So we've got to get get this. We're hoping to get approval of this budget amendment so that we can bring it to the board and for approval, so we can get our name on the list, because they're only going to produce so many chassis for next year, and to secure these trucks so we can continue with our lift station pumpings, biosolids, and all as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a few questions on that. When you said those chassis aren't available till next year, we're talking 2023?
Yes.
Wow. I'd like to compliment you at looking at the long term for our scheduled maintenance on our water towers. That makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad you pursued that. So high compliments on that. To recap, when you first started, I think I understood you to say that the 2 tank trucks that you were talking about and correct me if I'm wrong, in our priority-based budgeting, we approved $290,000.
Yeah, that is correct, yes.
And so that was approved when we did our PBB, but now that we're getting ready to order it, that price has increased by $57,000. So that's what you're going to be coming and asking for, is that increase.
That is correct.
Thank you. And would you give us a brief update on our water tower, west side of town, new water tower?
The Dewey Ball project?
I'm sorry?
The Dewey Ball
Yes,
improvements?
yes.
Okay. Yes, so right now we're working on, Keith's crew is working on a site plan for the sign replacements or sign relocations.
The billboards, yeah.
The billboards. They're Wayne and Curtis are putting together an exhibit that we need to submit to MoDOT. So once we get that exhibit finished, we will submit with some other information to MoDOT. Then they'll draft the sign reset agreement. That could take a couple of months to get through the MoDOT process. Once we receive that agreement from MoDOT, I'll have to bring it before the board for the board's signature, mayor's signatures, and then it goes back to the commission for their approval, and then at that point we can start construction. We got to time the bids out of the construction as well for the signs and for the project itself. But we're waiting on the sign reset agreement with MoDOT before we can do anything.
So all the architectural and drawings and all that has been done and approved?
Yes, so the water main plans are finished and they've been submitted to DNR for review. DNR has to review the plans and issue a permit for them. So
I understand that we have a couple months working with the billboard issue. What, can you give timing on, I know we have that 2 months, and during that time, I'm assuming we're getting everything else in the approval process.
That is correct, yeah.
Do you have a guesstimate? We won't hold it against you. When we think we'll start construction on that?
So I'm aiming for September 1st.
And a completion date of,
It will take a little over a year, so you're looking at probably 2023, late fall of 2023.
okay,
So,
fair enough. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Yep.
I just had one, Kendall, related to that, the first truck. Sorry, the first truck in their response, I'm trying to get back to it here, where it says that their pricing is subject to a 14-day expiration. What does that really mean to us?
so the truck chassis, the bid price did not have a stipulation on it, but the tank pricing did. So we're working with that contractor to secure that pricing. And I think I failed to mention too that, so we've got two costs there. We got a $13,000 cost, and what we're doing is that newer truck, the truck that we have so much trouble with, the tank is in great shape. So we're going to save some money by taking that tank and transferring it over to the new chassis. So instead of spending another $88,000 on a new tank, we're just going to utilize the old one, transfer it over, do some coatings on it, things of that nature, bring it up to a newer standard, and move it over. And then the other tank is obviously, it's a 2005 truck, so it's much older. It needs to be replaced. So, but again, yeah, we're working with those folks. They recommended for us to go ahead and purchase the materials and everything at this point. So we're looking at that, of even storing those materials on site until such time the chassis come in, and then we can deliver those up to the builder anyway, to have it put all together once the chassis come in. So.
Thank you.
Kendall, what can we do to help move this along? You're going to need an approval budget amendment for the extra money. Is that going to be presented to this board and then go to the Board of Aldermen?
That is correct, yeah. So in the next Board of Aldermen available meeting, which will be, for me, probably be the last meeting in April, that's when I'll bring this truck, or these chassis and tank capital item to the board at that point.
Would it be appropriate to ask this board to vote and approve it so it's recommended to the Board of Aldermen?
Yes.
That's why we're bringing it for you today, so that you can recommend this. It's a budget amendment of a little less than $57,000. The reason why we're having to bring it is because you're crossing funds. So even though he was able to offset it, he offset it by a capital fund with an operating fund. So if it's crossing funds, we have to get board approval. So we're bringing it before you today so that you can make that recommendation, so that when we stand before the board itself and ask for approval of that budget amendment, that we have this committee's recommendation for it. So yes, sir, we would be looking for that today.
Okay, so you're asking for a vote for this board to recommend that to the Board of Aldermen?
Just approval and a recommendation to the board. Yes, sir. That's right.
Would somebody word that request so we could vote on it?
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve a budget amendment in the amount of 50, I had it right in front of me a second ago.
57,105?
Yes,
Is that right, Jim?
$57,105.81 in the utilities budget to move from between accounts from 146 account to the 620 account to allow for the purchase of a new vehicle and tank for the utilities department.
All right, that's the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you, Kendall.
And Kendall, should we anticipate a double read probably to help secure that pricing? Okay, I'm just looking ahead.
The next item we have is the Convention Center report, and one thing that I wanted to remind you, he's going to present capital, and so I wanted to let you know that in the capital reserve, we have about $340,000 in the capital reserve. And just a reminder, the capital reserve is a shared account between the convention center and the city for their capital needs. And so what happens is on a monthly basis, per the contract, 4% of the revenues goes into that capital reserve to build up so that they can use that for the capital needs for the convention center. And then when he's done, I'll still have a couple of things for the director's report, so hang tight. There you go. Thank you.
Excuse me, Sam, I'm going to need you to give your name, address, social security number. Actually, before you start, Sam, there's been a request for us to take a quick break, if you don't mind.
Sure, I don't mind at all.
So we'll take a 7-minute break and come back.
I needed a break. That's what I was gonna say. I'll take it if he's
Yeah.
So anyway, tomorrow I am like booked, so.
You're booked?
Yeah, I've got a full schedule tomorrow.
Well, maybe you and Brenda can go to
But
the
I don't
John
think I
Maxwell. I'll send you, there's a email that you can go in and register.
Okay.
So,
We'll call this meeting back to order, pick up where we left off, and we're going to get a report from Sam about our convention center.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the time. This is going to be a 2021 recap, unaudited, and I'm going to also review some capital needs for 2022 and a little bit of detail in between. So, very happy to be here and tell you about it. Here's some highlights and some lowlights of 21, and I'm going to tell you it was a roller coaster ride. You know, coming off of the pandemic, cancellations, going into 21 cancellations, we literally had, and you'll see in the lowlights, quite a few cancellations. But you know, in the positive manner, the team over there worked incredibly hard. They gave their blood, sweat, and tears to really make things happen over there. And you know, we utilized the marketing fund in a very creative way, as we've been talking about in the past at some of the previous updates. But here's where the rubber meets the road. We gained 13 events because of this. We are retained. So that is a kudos to you for allowing creativity in marketing and incentives, because that right there has shown a dramatic increase. To that end, we beat the budget bottom line by $220,760. That I'm going to go into detail a little bit more, but as a highlight, the revenue, top line revenue, we beat budgeted revenue by almost $100,000 there. Now, we all know that we want to reduce expenses and keep expenses to a minimum. And just raising revenue is not enough, so we want to look at both of those. But we reduced our overall expenses by $122,000 and some change. An additional 25 event days were hosted versus what we budgeted and what we thought. So that's, again, very positive. This is huge. An additional 26,259 attendees came through the building than we budgeted and we thought. That is huge. So another highlight, we continue to have the team sales approach that we've all talked about and we do love so much, and it's very effective with the Chamber and, of course, the Hiltons of Branson team, as well as the Branson Convention Center team. We all know we're having some difficulty, if not a lot of difficulty, retaining talent and team members, as well as recruiting. So, you know, we've started a program that helps retain loyalty of our team members in a very nice way. It's called AwardCo, and I've done this in a few other markets. But you know, if you're familiar with military challenge coins, a high-ranking individual in the military may find something that a soldier has done that requires them to be recognized. I've adopted that in our team methods over at the convention center, and when I see a team member doing a great job, I give them a coin. And this coin, you can see in this picture here, and here is an actual coin that I'm going to give to you so you can pass it around and actually read it. But limits exist only in the mind. We are doing a lot more with less. We are lean staff right now, just like everybody else. Some of it's not by choice, but they're doing an incredible job out there, and I just want to give a public kudos to all the team members at the Branson Convention Center. On the back, a lot of motivating phrases that we use every day: stay strong, never give up, be grateful, work hard, stay humble, be kind, and always get to yes. That's where we are. We're in the yes business. So a little bit of the lowlights, though. $1.1 million in lost cancellation revenue. That is incredible. And that's all due to COVID. People just they canceled their meetings, they were going to reschedule, it's canceled, done. So even with 1.1 million in lost revenue, I'm here to say that we still beat budget by $220,000 and some change. That's incredible. So, and that's a reforecast, if we remember, from half the year last year. We talked about some of the staffing challenges, but we also have inventory and delivery challenges. Food cost has skyrocketed. I don't have to tell you, everyone goes to the grocery store, pretty frequently. I think less frequent now, but supply chain and inventory delivery challenges has hit our industry completely for the catering side of things. The food cost, from the farmer on up, everything has increased, including fuel now. So fuel charges even for delivery of even utilities is hitting. So there's an overall increase of doing business. Jamie mentioned it earlier. Inflation, we don't really know what's going to happen with it, but I can tell you what's happening in our products that we're buying to resell, such as food products and things of that nature. They're increasing. So, we like to try to pass that on, but sometimes you can't. I'm going to give you this coin before I continue. Check it out. Here's the recap of the budget, but here's the economic impact that we talk about at every presentation. So we had beat budget by $220,000. Right now we're sitting at $126,546,000 deficit for 2021. And I'll show you some comparisons of 19, 20. They're very interesting. But here's the return on your investment. This is not my calculation. This is the Chamber's DMI, Destination Marketing International's calculation, industry standard calculation for this. You're looking at 118,000 room nights booked through the convention center. And that is a team approach. It's not just our team at the convention center. I just want to make that abundantly clear. The indirect economic impact is over $62 million of 2021 as a whole. That is an incredible return on investment, and I want to find a stock that has that return because I'm going to buy it. Here's a recap in graphical form in a little bit more detail. So you can see the overall expenses on the right side were reduced by 122. So budget versus actual. So the total expenses were 3.3 and some change when we actualized 3.2 and some change. You can see the total revenue difference there. And when we drill down into 25 more event days versus budgeted, that is really a successful year. We talked about 26,000 people, more than we thought. We thought we would get 65,713. We got 91,972. You can see the income, the direct expenses, but the bottom line, we were at 126,546 versus what we thought on a reforecast half the year through last year was 347,306. If you remember, that number was in the 700s back before, I guess it was August of 20. That we submitted that for the 21 budget. And so, we got together with Jamie and we really scrubbed up the numbers and it got even better than that. Here is a summary of the 2020 actuals year end and then the budgeted 21 versus actual 21. So I put 2020 in there as just a comparison because it was probably one of our worst years because of the pandemic. We were at a $1.5 million deficit, just like everybody else was hurting very, very badly. So we were so successful that we swung from that $1.1 million revenue loss, as you see there, to a 126 deficit. So if we didn't have COVID, and we can pretend we didn't have that, this convention center would have been smoking. It would have been great. But it's still great. It would have been incredible. So remember the governmental accounting versus performance accounting? That is nothing more than a comparison of where the marketing fund expenditures are listed in the expense side if there is an underwriting or incentive. So the 13 events that I talked about earlier are indicated in the expense side for total indirect expenses for the governmental accounting 2021, 3.2 million in expenses. When you take out $340,000 of marketing incentives in the performance side of viewing this type of thing, then the bottom line becomes a positive. So, but for accounting's sake, we do have to include those types of funds into an expense side as well when we're normally underwriting business as a war chest. So, you know, performance-wise, we're good with 213 plus, and then on the accounting side, of course, we're just a little off from that. You have any questions so far on this one?
Sam, let me, if I can, let me rephrase what I
Yeah.
just heard you say. The convention center is owned by the city of Branson, and your firm is the managing partner of that, or the managing entity. So each year that the convention center has a deficit, out of our city funds, we subsidize that loss. It wasn't long ago, in fact, I was an alderman when we were recognizing a $700,000 subsidy to the convention center, and that was pre-COVID. So when we look at our overall budget, we were taking $700,000, that money that we could spend elsewhere, and we were subsidizing the convention center. That is a huge number. Acknowledging convention centers really aren't designed to be profit centers. They're really designed for the huge economic impact that the city receives in tax revenues from the number of people the convention center brings in, lodging,
Sure.
attractions, restaurants, and all that. So what I'm hearing you say is in 2021, we budgeted a loss of $347,000 that the city was going to have to cover for the loss.
Correct.
And we ended up 200,000?
126,000.
126. So $220,000 difference.
Correct.
I just wanted to emphasize that. That is huge. So when we look at, we as a city, when we look at our funds, Jamie, if I need correction, please don't hesitate. When we look at our city funds, instead of, no, excuse me, in addition to the economic impact, which is phenomenal, you represent up there 62 million. I did some quick math and I came up with 105 million. But 62 million of economic impact, the revenues that generated to the city far, far exceed the amount of subsidy for the convention center. Jamie, would you like to pipe in?
Sure. One thing I wanted to mention to you is that 343 is operational. It doesn't include your 500,000 of marketing, okay? So the 700,000 that you're referring to back in 2019, that included the 500,000 of marketing. So if you want to compare apples to apples, the 700,000 from 2019, and we were doing 260 and 500,000, that 343 is only operational, which would compare to the 260. So if you add your 500,000 of marketing in, you're about 843,000. I just wanted to make
Okay,
sure
so
that was
help me
clear.
with, okay, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
So to say, I think what you just said, is our budgeted number was a negative 347 plus 500,000.
Yes, sir.
So it's $850,000
Yes, sir.
potential expense to the
Yes,
city.
if you want to compare that, yes.
And actual, including the 500,000, we were down,
It would have been, what, 713, something like that instead, yeah, if you add the marketing piece into it. That's correct, right? Because that's just operational, what he's talking about. That
Okay.
doesn't include your marketing expense.
Okay.
So if you want to compare it, I just wanted to make sure that the 260 plus the 500,000, that's where you got the loss of, or the subsidy, I should say, of the 760,000.
Okay.
So if you want to compare it to today, you need to take that 343 and add the 500,000 to it. So you're looking at 943 versus 760. In reality, he brought that down to, you want to say about 713 instead of that 800 that we were looking at.
Okay, thank you
Okay,
for that
you're
clarity.
welcome.
Sam, well, I'll wait to compliment you when you get done, but I just think you're doing a great job.
No, I appreciate that. The marketing fund usage is not in the, we call that below the line.
Okay.
As well as capitals below the line. That's why it's not included in an operational presentation. But right, as far as city funds in general and total, that is correct. So any other questions on this? You can see the comparisons here between 2020, which I hate to compare because that's certainly the worst. You know what? It's actually been worse than that. Prior to ASM Global coming on, I believe it was in the 2 million range. So, yeah, that was, I think, the highest it's ever been.
Yeah.
So here's some notable expense reductions. And these are reductions only, but I wanted to bring it to your attention because this was a very difficult situation to monitor expenses when expenses were actually increasing. So contracted services, net salaries, benefits, you can see that we had budgeted almost $2 million for salaries and benefits. We're at 1.5 and some change there. That's a significant reduction. Contracted services, you can see, is a significant reduction. Minor reduction was operations, and that's a very large category that can include paper towels, you name it. Operational supplies, utilities was very interesting. We hope and certainly pray that that's going to be the case in '22. We doubt it with what we're seeing in fuel surcharges and those types of things for utilities. But you can see that's another significant reduction from last year. So those are some of the notables that we really kept our eye on. While the revenue was increasing, we also kept an eye on the expenses. And we should never lose focus of that. So even in a challenging year, 2021, I do believe, the rise in food costs even then, the rise in labor shortage due to, using more part-time labor from staffing agencies, which is actually more expensive to use, those types of things, all increased. The difficulties in the operation, we still maintain the 90% or better customer service score. And once again, that's kudos to the team at the Branson Convention Center because, hey, I'm just giving you the report. They're doing the blood, sweat, and tears every day. So I want to thank them. Sales, events, 90%. A real good, notable one is the courtesy of the building staff. When you're under a lot of stress, sometimes you don't feel like being too courteous. We talked about that a little bit. For MONASP that just occurred, we're lean there, but everyone's still smiling there. They have a great attitude. Cleanliness, that's another thing that typically slips whenever you're short of staff. It didn't slip in our customer service scores. So, and you can see there. So prior to hosting an event, they thought that, there'd be about 85% satisfaction, and after we beat them by 5% in perception. So that's good news too. I do have.
Excuse me, Stan,
Yes,
before you
absolutely.
move on.
Yes.
Stan, I believe these numbers also affect their bonuses
That's correct.
in their contract.
Yeah, that's what
right?
they're based upon.
Right.
And I know yesterday I had the privilege of welcoming the quilt people in
Quilters.
town for a week,
Yes.
right? 10,000 people for a week.
Yes.
There's a few revenue dollars there. And I apologize, I forget the president's name who organized all this.
Bill.
Bill.
Yep.
Bill went on and on and on about how, from the initial discussion through opening day, I know there's a tremendous amount that has to go on, and he just went on and on and on about you and your staff, and heard a lot more yeses than nos. Very few nos, a lot of yeses. That's straight from the horse's mouth. That's a guy who was in the trenches to get this thing up and running.
Absolutely.
I just
Thank
want
you.
to share that.
Thank you for mentioning that. And just to let everyone know, this is a national convention that is here in Branson. There is going to be, there is, 10,000 people in town. If you're trying to get a restaurant reservation, you know, the good news is you'll probably be best to eat at home. But I'm going to tell you, they're happy. It's been a lot of work. This was canceled and rescheduled because of COVID. This was supposed to happen last year. And this was their first time back in Branson, or in Branson, and they are going to come for another 2 years. So we just made that agreement yesterday. So, you know, kudos to our partnership at the Chamber and the Hilton, because we cannot do things like this without that partnership and working together. And we all have our own interest, but at the same time, we have a common ground. And so that's a success right there. that we can
Sam, I
point to.
heard
Yes, ma'am.
that this was a highly competitive, coveted group that could have chosen to have gone anywhere.
Absolutely.
And different markets really try to woo them over. And so kudos to you, Chamber, everyone for making it happen, and to know that we're going to get them additional years
Yes.
is a feather in our cap, I think. So good job.
It is. Thank you for saying that. And just to let you know the type of cities they go to, I mean, they went to Daytona Beach, you know, a couple of months ago. So we're highly competitive, as you said, and we're utilizing marketing funds and any tools we can to make sure we close business. And I'm going to tell you, our partners are great. Even Branson Landing, they come to the table. Sean and Nikki over there has done an incredible job coming on board as a partner with the Hilton and the Chamber. So kudos to them as well. Yep. Any other questions before we get into capital? All right. Go right into capital. You ready? All right. Here's some, so we have a capital budget that is every year. Of course, in the pandemic year, we had no capital budget request because no one can afford that. But now we're getting back on track. And thankfully, we're going to try to catch up. There's a lot of maintenance to be done at the convention center. But we prioritized in what's called a P1 and a P2, our needs here. The P1's priority 1, P2 priority 2. And typically in the priority 1, it's life safety and return on investment type of items. So I wanted to review P1s with you in detail, which you can see P2s there on the list as well. We have a security camera upgrade, and I'm going to flip back and forth because there's detail behind these pages. The security camera system upgrade is very important. Right now we have no archiving abilities. We only have live watch abilities. And this new system, and Chad brought this to our attention, that it would dovetail with the city system. And I believe that the police department can monitor this on a 24/7, 365 basis if needed. And so I believe it's the same system that the city is using that we will now have at the convention center. And there's a lot of synergies there that can occur. That improvement is going to be $93,088. Now this is life safety because of, you know, things that can happen in a public venue, but also archiving, picture quality, and enhanced abilities from motion detector on is really needed. The next thing that's needed is the audio system replacement. That's $43,000. Right now, it is a manual system of evacuation if you're in the ballroom, because this system is our evacuation system as well as our PA system, and it is not operational right now. So very, very important. The total audio system that these components are housed within is operational, but this section is not. So that's what we're talking about here. It's an audio system replacement basically for this section, not the entire building. So very, very critical. And if you've been in the garage, the parking garage across Sycamore, and used the stairs like I try to avoid, but I'm going to tell you, they need replacement. They're corroding right now from the salt, you know, that we put down, et cetera, and normal wear and tear, but that's about $35,000 of replacement. That is a life safety issue, for certain. We don't want anybody certainly falling through those cracks. Some more P1s. Variable drive motors for our HVAC systems. So these are very interesting and very, very well needed to keep costs low. And if you don't know what a VFD drive is, that allows you, right now, our drives are down. It's full on air conditioning or full off air conditioning. So if you've been in a venue and you have kind of in between, that's what these things do. So you can throttle this down, you can throttle it up, and that helps your expense cycle. So for $32,000, we can replace these, and that's certainly a return on investment. While it's not life safety, it will pay for itself many times over. Our data and phone server needs replacing immediately. That's at end of life. There is no phone backup, so phones go down with this server. So does email, computer, and data. And phone. So right now, that replacement is going to be $40,970. All of this is in the budget, by the way. So this is all can be paid for. Now, this is not a life safety, but someone, I'm sure in this room is going to tell me it is.
Yes, it is.
Our espresso specialty coffee machine.
Sam, I would really have rather you wouldn't have put that in there because Tina's been trying to get me to buy one of these for her.
They're not cheap.
That's what I told her.
Yeah.
Maybe we could share.
So, we have our coffee cart that we utilize for a lot of events, and we serve Starbucks coffee. This is a very high-end situation, and we make a lot of revenue off of this. So this is, while it's not life safety, it is an ROI that we need to keep our eye on, and so that replacement is in there as well. That's why it's in a P1, because it's a very nice ROI. That's it for our capital request, but I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet so that you can understand that the total P1 cost is $94,942. Now that's as of submission of this, and we all know the price of everything's going up daily, so hopefully that will remain at least in that ballpark. Priority 2, 254. Like Jamie said, what we have in the capital fund right now, I believe is about $349. After the P1 and P2 expenses, if you were to approve both, we would have $411 in the account, which is not a lot. However, understand this is replenished as we go as 4% of revenues. So it's not like it's going to be depleted and not replaced on a monthly basis. Typically, we do annual. But if it's needed to be monthly, it certainly can be that as well. So it is a recurring fund, self-replenishing, we call it. So that's what we have right now for our P1s and P2s. I can go over some of the P2s just very quickly. Boiler tank replacement, right now, the hot water boiler, we have 2 of them. One of them is down completely and cannot be repaired. That services the Hilton Laundry, so that's very important as well. We are getting by with a higher utility rate because we have to heat quicker, more hot water in a quicker time frame just to keep up with that lack of capacity. So just to let you know, that is certainly a need. The next one is the kitchen cooler, walk-in cooler evaporator coils are going bad. That would need to be replaced. And the elevator. Now, this may be bumped up to a P1. If next week I have a repairman come in, it just went down, the Exhibit Hall B elevator. We do have an Exhibit Hall A elevator, so that we still have one that's operational. So critical repairs needed. It's a hydraulic pump motor that is going bad. So those things are not cheap. When you say escalator, elevator, that's not cheap. So that's the P1s, P2s for our capital request for 2022. Does anyone have any questions on any of these items?
I have one. You mentioned that we have a boiler that's down, and that is used for the laundry for the Hilton.
Right. In addition to the kitchen at the convention center.
Yeah. But I'm going to assume
Yes.
the lion's share is that.
Absolutely. It's 89% actually. Yeah.
So question for Stan. I'm assuming somewhere in the contract between the city and the Hilton, we have agreed to pay 100% for the boiler that services 90% of the Hilton.
I'm sure that the boiler, if the boiler is any way associated to the laundry, I'm sure it is part of the agreement that we have to maintain that.
Thank you.
All righty.
Any other
So
questions?
The elevator that you're looking at right now, is that one that guests use?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, I went to convention center, and they had elevators everywhere, and there was only like 2 of them that worked.
Yeah.
And standing in line with all of those people that were attending things just like me, I am telling you, the level of frustration and bad comments and bad perception of those folks at that, it was the one in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Right.
It was, I mean, it spread like wildfire.
Absolutely.
Everybody was annoyed, and it was like, really? You can't get your elevators to work? So I just want to throw that out there.
Yes,
But even though
absolutely.
we still have one, perception of the
Yes.
guests is perception is reality, right? And so it's
I would
It's
say
important.
absolutely correct, especially with an event like we have this week. There's a significant more amount of scooters and wheelchairs than there would be for a cheerleading event, as an example, or a dance event. So absolutely, it is critical. While I wouldn't say life safety is certainly pretty darn close. We do have escalators, but that doesn't solve the problem for wheelchairs and scooters. Another point that we're thankful that we're not in the position is restrooms being out of order. That's kind of the next thing that really gets people upset. And so we really like to attend to that and make sure that that's in working order. Absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Yes. So my question is, clearly, we are close to using the dollars that are in that fund. So given where we are right now, and you go out for bid, and that changes, so what's the process to make sure that enough funds are available then to cover that? Is that additional amendments, or?
That was exactly what I was wanting.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
all for, just to say,
Oh, I am too.
I'm
I'm
all
on
for every
board.
one
Yeah,
of these
just-
requests. My only concern is, and Sam kind of mentioned it, how do we get that reserve back up?
Yeah.
Because we never know.
I don't recommend taking it that low. 411 is probably not the best idea to take that reserve that low, especially since we have history on using that reserve for, say, when we had a tornado and how it affected, we needed that reserve. A benchmark would be keeping it above a 200,000 level line. So maybe with the priority costs, because, yeah, so if you can keep that capital reserve above a 200, and then as you accrue more in the year, bring some more capital back, that would be my suggestion. Because have you gone out to bid? Are those just your estimated costs? Because what we're seeing.
We have received quotes, but not formal.
Right. And so what we're seeing here at the city is they're only going to hold that pricing for 14 days. So those prices are going to change very, very quickly. So that would be just my recommendation. And what we're seeing so far at the city, those prices are going to be quite a bit higher. I would recommend at all times keeping a baseline of that 200,000, just because we have been there with this particular convention center, and we know how quickly it gets wiped out.
So, Jamie, before you leave, and I appreciate what you just said, do you have an idea, and this may not be fair off the top of your head, but how long, what the projection would be to build that back up to, if we approved all of this, how long it would take to get it back up to 200,000?
Yeah, so just to give you an idea, there's about 15,000 currently that's unfunded, and that's for 1 month. So just to give you an idea about that, and you'll double that, so like in the busy months, you'll probably have about a $20,000 reserve on a monthly basis. So if you took it down to 400,000, it's going to take you probably the rest of the year to build that back up, and that's our weather months and our flood months and those kind of things. And I don't say that to be negative. I don't say that because we don't need those things. I say that because out of history, over time, when we've had the floods and we've had the tornadoes and stuff, the reserves that we've had to build up, we completely had to wipe that out for certain things, knowing that we'll get paid back maybe through insurance or through FEMA and SEMA, but that takes a while, so you don't want to use everything you have right now because you're just in March, right? So that's just my recommendation.
So am I hearing you say we should take the espresso machine out?
Man, that's a tricky one because I like the espresso, but I would definitely go for your top priorities at this point.
So Sam, based on that,
Yeah, that's why I divided into 1 and 2 for those types of considerations.
So if we need to keep the balance at around $200,000, so you would have some room if we met the,
The priority 1 side.
yeah,
That's correct.
yeah,
And we would still achieve the fund balance reserve.
yeah.
And then build up. And absolutely, anything can happen at any time, we know this. But it is being replenished on a monthly basis, so there's that. However, it may not be as replenished as quickly as needed for some emergency that might occur, of course.
So just so I'm clear, so if we were to approve priority 1, take that plunge, then
Yeah.
obviously there's a balance, but then I guess still the question is, if there was an emergency or something that arose and there's not enough, then the mechanism to pay that is out of reserve? General fund, yeah, so.
And you think about if it
Into
affects I'm sorry, yes, thank you. If it affects the convention center, it'll also affect the city.
Yeah.
So, and where does that come from for the city's bucket too? So just remember that, the whole picture. Again, I would recommend keeping a baseline in the reserves of 200,000.
just so we're all clear, if we did approve your priority 1 cost, then the reserve would be $95,000 versus the 200.
Right now, we're in about 349 of a fund total.
Yeah.
Right. So we can achieve the reserve that is being discussed with the priority 1 spend. We can have both of those.
Actually, isn't it priority 2?
No,
Because if you do priority one,
Jamie?
you have 94. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about that. Just looking at it, it appears that if you do all of
that's
priority 1, you only have 95,000
That's
left.
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Just-
I was looking at the wrong column. You're
Yeah.
correct. We would have 94 left. So if you would like me to reduce that and then have the reserve at 200 or whatever the reserve is comfortable being with you all, I can come back and present just that, if that's something that you're interested in. Or we can just approve a dollar amount. It's up to you.
Excuse me, Mayor?
Yes.
If I may.
I'm doing some math.
There is some urgency with the servers. I
Right.
mean, the camera system, I think Sam could speak on that in terms of urgency, but the servers, we definitely have some urgency with that, just to kind of throw that out there. Not to put more pressure on you, but
No, sure, sure.
I
So
would
that's what-
say security cameras and servers, the computer, the phone and data, absolutely, Chad.
and as far as making a decision today to move forward, if at all possible, with at least that component, would be very helpful.
Yep.
So I heard you say the servers, the data, and the espresso machine.
Well,
We can throw that in there for good measure.
we
yeah.
can probably do
Who wants
something
to
with
turn
the
down a
espresso
dollar? We got to
machine
replenish
later
the
in the
fund,
year.
right?
No, but, HVAC, the drives, while we're still operational, good example, we're still operational. However, we will notice that the expenses are higher due to not having them. So is it critical? If you want to save money, it's critical. The coffee machine, okay, it's just a return on investment. It's not critical. However, you make money on it. So I would say that the things that are life safety that you probably don't make money on, but you definitely want, would be the audio system and the security system. The stairs, they can, I'm probably wait until fourth quarter for that, and get away with it. But understand that this is an annual discussion. We can do any of these throughout the year as needed. This is just an annual discussion.
Would you address that elevator repair based on Pam's
Yeah.
comments?
Well, the elevator, like I said, we have two elevators, one in Exhibit Hall A, one in B. They are passenger elevators. We have a hydraulic pump that is going out, and it's probably out as we speak. That will be analyzed next week. And right now, that elevator repair is estimated to be about $20,500.
For the customer satisfaction, customer satisfaction only, that would be a P1, a priority.
Customer satisfaction, absolutely.
If that's not included in
Absolutely.
the initial priority, then our
Absolutely.
scores are going to go down.
Correct. Now, as of this time, whenever I submitted, it was operational. So right now, it's down. I'll get the diagnosis, like I said, next week.
Jamie? Because we have some things that are more urgent that's included in here, would your recommendation be to approve P1 costs, leaving, but you have to prioritize them, we're not gonna get them all, or whatever, but leave a balance of 200 in there? I mean, how would you prefer us look at that, I guess?
Well, and that's a good question, because we don't yet know what the set prices will be. That's a little bit tricky. So, yes, that's exactly what I would recommend. As long as we leave a $200,000 balance in there, because I just quickly did a calculation, at 3.7 million revenue coming in, 4% of that, you're going to replenish that at 148,000 reserve for this year. So if you wipe it all out, you won't even get back up to the 200. So with that being said, if you keep it 200,000, let them have a little bit of that liberty and prioritize it as their needs are. That would just be my recommendation.
So, because of the sense of urgency, this would allow this to move forward and not have to come back to us at the next meeting
Right.
or whatever, so
Yes.
that then this could move on to the Board of, does this have to go to the
It
Board?
doesn't, per the contract, the Finance
Okay.
Committee,
So
because
this
it's a
could-
shared.
This could be in effect,
Could I make a recommendation? With what Jamie just said, that just based on 4% on the year, they'll bring back 148,000 approximately. I understand the 200,000, I do, but I also understand the need here. What about if we were, because it will build back some, right? What if we went to 175 as a cap? And then we let them have a little capital up front to get some of these things done that need to be done, and it should be back up to 200 within a few months instead of the whole year. I'm just trying to help them because Sam is in the exact same position the city's in. We have so many capital items that we have to get done, and if you just keep pushing them back, you're going, and even more so, you're going to lose that customer satisfaction. So it's just a thought process. I'm just trying to get everybody to think, see where we can find maybe some compromise.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and Jamie, close your ears. Because of the economic impact from this convention center to our the dramatic effect on our budget, I would like to suggest exchanging the stairs until later in the year and replacing that with the elevator repair. And that would then leave us with that 95,000 left over in the reserve versus the 200. And because this has such an impact on the city, Jamie, we have, I don't want to say excess, but we have excess in our reserve account in our general fund. I think the 100,000, we have it there for in case of emergencies. and our reserves are healthy in our general fund. And so I guess I would ask the temperature of this board, if we agreed to these changes, acknowledging we're going to end up with $95,000 reserve versus 200 that's desired. If these priorities and the impact outweigh the fact that we would be agreeing to a $100,000 reserve versus a $200,000. Comments from the board on, what's your thoughts?
I like it a lot.
Here.
So my thought is, so what I'm thinking is maybe we land somewhere in between and assume a little bit of that risk then, because we don't know 100% if something else is going to happen, plus what the fund balance is going to be at the end of the year. But I'm thinking a little more generous than Stan's, but if we approve not to exceed, say, $200,000, then at least by the end of the year, we would be back up fairly close to that $200,000 figure, if my math is correct, or over that. And then just recognizing the fact that there are other things that could go wrong, right? And so we could be having this conversation again, but it seems like maybe that would be a prudent thing to do, to be proactive, to get some of these things taken care of. So anyway, that's my thought.
And what about spreading some of these over a period of time, the ones that are not so urgent, so that, we're rebuilding
Yes.
that fund before we actually spend this? Is there a
Absolutely.
thought process to
No,
that
that
as
is the
well?
thought process. This is an annual request, so this would not happen all at one time. This would be in phases throughout the year, so it wouldn't affect cash flow immediately. So if something happens, then we can drop off a project in between that. So this wouldn't all happen in the next 90 days. And this fund would not be depleted in 90 days as an example. It's just an example, but this is an annual program, yes. And we definitely acknowledge that it's great to have a reserve, and while we don't know what can happen, we always know there'll never be enough money for when something does happen. So, we didn't anticipate a tornado, nor can we budget for that. But at the same time, it is always prudent to have something left in the account, absolutely.
And I appreciate, Jamie, I just want you to know, I appreciate your conservative view to this, because we don't know what's going to happen. This is the Ozarks, so we don't know whether it's going to be a flood, a tornado, or what. But I do think, to me, the approach of over time as you can, I mean, there's some that we absolutely know have to be done ASAP.
Yes.
But over time and during that time, trying to rebuild those balances up. And I know, we're saying we've got a healthy fund balance here at the city. I mean, that could change because we don't know what we're going to have to supplement either. If something happens here, then, so I just think a cautious approach to that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah. The first two lines there in the P1s, security system and the audio system, that would be our target for the first things
Those are urgent.
to look at.
And I might remind everybody, you got 2 weeks to get it done or the price is going up, so you need to factor that in there somewhere.
Sure.
And I wholeheartedly agree. Let's get it done because your return on investment is incredible.
Can any of these cost on some of these that you've had brief talks with, can they be spread out through the year payments, or is it best to get it all paid up front?
So only the maintenance agreements can be done that way, which unfortunately the rest cannot, right? Unless it's a lease, that hits operation and it doesn't hit capital.
Yeah, Jamie, actually, you bring up a good point, because what we're looking at is a snapshot if all these expenses were paid today
Right.
out of our existing reserve. If this was spread out over the year, then our reserve would never hit 411, or excuse me, never hit the 95,000, because as we're paying for some of these things, we also have the benefit of those months of increasing that reserve account, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just,
Correct. Cash
really,
flow.
it's just going to take good management. And-
Yeah.
Because if we get the 148 back over the year, if you take 148 and 200,000 from 349, which leaves you 149, everything, I mean, it'll be close. but
It will be close.
It's just good management, and
Yeah.
you manage it over the year rather than all at once. So I
Yeah.
think, I think it's a good idea.
So if I'm thinking that right, Jamie, we wouldn't be in a position of only having a $95,000 reserve, because as the months go by that Sam is spending this capital, we're also having the months go by of increasing that reserve account.
Yeah, I think Stan said it best, as long as it's managed properly. I will tell you that, I know you guys know this, so I'm just going to say it. I am very conservative, and because of the history that has gone on with the city, but I also know that what we're facing, even with some of our IT, which I'm going to speak to you about that in my director's report, that we budget 260,000, or no, excuse me, we budget 200,000. It's coming back in that we're going to have to spend 325. Just keep that in mind, because technology costs with everything else are rising. So I would say, yes, you're exactly right to say that if you spread it out over time, but start with the security camera, whatever Chad thinks is like the top priority, start with that one and see what the actual costs are going to be, and then move down through your list. That would just be my recommendation. And again, it's just my recommendation. It's y'all's decision, so sure.
So Sam, I think that might be healthy, this is a snapshot of
Annually.
in a moment in time.
Correct.
And but the actual cash effect will be expenses going out as the
Absolutely.
funds are increasing. So based on that, would the board agree to approve priority one with Sam managing it? Knowing that our reserve would never drop to the 95,000, because it's going to take months to get some of this done, and during that time, the reserve's going to be
They're
increasing.
accumulating within that time as well as the project duration as
Yeah.
well. Absolutely. And keep in mind that we will do, within the first 60 or 90 days, we'll look to do the first two, if possible, and then maybe some variation after that on those two even. But then after that, if we see that, hey, those things were more than quoted prior, then some of the other things fall off.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you agree, though, to include the elevator into P1 and remove the
Yeah.
stairs put that into P2?
Yes.
Similar dollar amounts, I mean, it's $10,000 difference in those.
And you might start with the espresso and do an upcharge on what you sell it for to increase the revenue.
It's now $50 a cup. No, I'm just kidding.
That's for aldermen, right? On that price for the cup.
Hey.
No, I would say no comment.
Oh, yeah, we'll approve for the alderman.
No, but thank you so much for understanding the challenge that we have here with limited funds and certainly unlimited needs. So,
So if I got this correct, I'm going to try to help us here. I would make a motion to approve the priority one capital request with the understanding of the elevator repair will replace the stair repair for 2022.
correct.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Sam, thank you very, very much.
Thank you all very much. I do appreciate it.
Are you ready for the director's report?
Sure.
Okay. Just a couple of things. Hang on one second, sorry. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing with the 76 CID financing. So the CID board had asked us to go and look at the financing, and we have had many discussions with our team, which is Gilmore and Bell and Columbia Capital, to talk about the different financing options that we have available for us. So with that being said, I think what we're going to come up against is we're going to be able to do maybe the financing by segments that we're working on. So, for example, we're looking at segment 1 and 2 for the next go-round, right? And so what we talked about was the options of we're looking at 90 million now versus 57 million because of the up costs. We'll say at least a minimum of 30%. We're not yet sure what the price is going to come in at or what we're going to be charged. We're not that far into negotiations yet. So we talked to them about doing the financing for the whole project at 90 million. The caveat with that is you have to have, for a construction project, you have to have it all done in 3 years. I do not think that the entire project, and I don't think anybody thinks that the entire project for 76 will be done from start to finish in 3 years. So I think that we maybe need to put that option aside and look at what's the segment 1 and 2. The idea behind that is I was kind of not for that because you're going to have cost of issuance, you're going to have additional charges with that, and you're running up against interest rate risks the longer you prolong it. But I'm not sure that we're going to have the option of the entire project unless we can really bust out the construction for all of it, and I don't think that's realistic. So we're looking at segments 1 and 2. The other thing that we talked about was the history. So what we can do is we can provide our financial advisor's history back from all of the CID, going back 10 years. Even though it wasn't established, we still have a sales tax base, a 1% base that we can provide them history off of. So with that being said, they've already run the numbers for us, so they told us about, okay, so you will be able to finance off the CID revenues about a $50 million, and then you can use the tourism tax for the other $40 million. And whether we choose to do that as a pay-as-you-go for the tourism portion or financing, it is a city project, so that does make sense to me. But I just kind of want to share, we're not bringing you a recommendation. I wanted you to know where we're at in the process because we will be talking to the CID board in just a little bit about what our findings were. So I just kind of wanted to bring that before you today to let you know that we are on top of it. We are moving forward, and we're in those discussions. And if y'all have any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer that at this time.
Jamie, for clarity, the 90 million, you broke it down 50 from the CID and 40 from tourism tax. How much of that 90 million total is the city responsible for versus the CID, the revenue from the CID tax?
Well, and the 50 million was determined because of the revenue history on the CID. That would have been the cap that they could borrow based on their 10-year history of revenue. Okay, so that's where the 50 million came in. Now, what you're asking is a little bit more complex, and it's a good question because the cooperative agreement doesn't specifically state city's responsible for this, CID is responsible for this. It's a little bit more vague, so it doesn't say. I've heard a lot, undergrounding is, the stuff underground is the city's responsibility, and the stuff above ground is the CID responsibility. But nowhere in the cooperative agreement does it state that, so it's a little bit more complex and to know how to manage that financially. And if we go back and adjust that, that'd be fine too. That's what I'm saying to you, is it doesn't specifically state that in the cooperative agreement that we have to use as the backup for what we do with the financing piece. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit more difficult to answer that question right now.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Out of the 1.9 million that the CID has agreed to repay the city for this underground we're doing now,
Okay?
What I don't know is, in addition to that 1.9 million, how much more is the city's portion of this?
Oh, for the undergrounding?
Yes. No, for segments 1 and 2, yeah.
Oh, for
total.
segments 1 and 2? So for segments 1 and 2, we're not, we talked about that this morning. We had an internal meeting with the 3 departments that were involved. Right now, the estimated cost prior to all the market change was about 15 million for segment 1 and 2. I would
15?
yes, and so I would assume we go with the 30%. I'm going to say it's going to be more like 20 or more than that, just because of we know what the cost changes are. So if you assume that 20 million, it's not yet been broken down, the cost estimate for the pieces underground versus the pieces overground. Now, I will tell you that through all the CID meetings, it has been for the entire project $7 million for the WOW factors. That was the project cut out for that, if I'm not mistaken. And so that would be the CID responsibility. Aside from that, because of, in my opinion, the cooperative agreement is a little bit vague, it's a little bit harder to determine that without set expectations at this point. Does that make sense?
The one thing that we do know is the water lines are our responsibility.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what
And
I
so
was going to
that
ask.
That is
portion-
true.
If we're trying to drill down on something, whether it's sewer and water, then 100% that would be
Yeah,
the city's responsibility.
Yes, but my question is,
Yeah.
and I agree with you, but
Yeah.
my question was how much of this 1.9
Is part of that.
is part of that?
Yeah.
Can I just ask for clarification? What's the 1.9? Is that the cost? I'm not sure what that number is.
My understanding is, because of past events, the CID agreed to reimburse the city
The 9.2?
9.6.
9.2.
9.2 over time.
Yes, sir.
And then recently, we amended that agreement where the CID was going to reimburse the city this 1.9 million instead of the city coming up with the funds.
And that was for the undergrounding for segment
That's right.
3. And that's
That's right.
already been done. Yeah, so that doesn't have, if I'm understanding it correctly, that doesn't have anything to do with segments 1 and 2 because that's for the undergrounding of segment 3. Am I understanding that correctly?
That was my understanding
Yes.
as well. And I don't recall, and I'm trying to think, we know that there will be limited undergrounding in section 1 and 2. I wish Keith was here, but there's limited, if any. I do know that section 3 was the most, what they told us was the most extensive for undergrounding. So it's just moving forward, getting the, as far as, they owed us 9.2, I believe it was.
They
at the
did, and they're
time.
down to about
They agreed to-
7.5.
Yeah, they're down to about 7.5 million now that we will have coming back. I don't have the exact figure yet for the entire length of water line.
Right.
And I don't know what's going to, section 1 and 2, once they meet today, with the architect, we should be able to start getting those figures that you're looking for.
And for water sewer, for the lines for segment 1 and 2, I know we've looked at a potential 2 million. That may be a little bit high, but we're looking at about 2 million for just the water sewer piece for that segment 1 and 2 only. That may give you a benchmark as to
Yeah.
what we're looking at.
I'm going to strongly recommend, before we have any of these decisions, Stan, it would be prudent for us to nail down this agreement. It troubles me to hear that we have some vagueness, we're not sure who's responsible for what.
Well, we do know pretty much who's responsible for what. The issue is that it says in the cooperative agreement, and this is where you get the below ground, above ground. It says in the CID agreement that the CID will pay for everything such as sidewalks, the wow factors, so forth and so on. And it also says that the CID, once they have paid their $7 million for the wow factors, with the agreement of the board, can also then begin paying for even the undergrounding. And so it just depends upon their revenue, how the revenues are flowing, what has come about. what the city is really responsible for paying for is what we would call the basic infrastructure from the city's standpoint. And anything above a normal sidewalk, the CID is responsible for. We did go back to a couple of different times from a legal perspective, and we were advised by our counsel that they felt it would be in our best interest to leave the cooperative agreement as written. It is a living document, however, I would kind of say, because as we go and as the CID pays and has no more expense, then their revenues can start to be utilized for the city's part of the undergrounding.
Oh, boy. Well, then, at a minimum, wouldn't we want to do a cost estimate on what you just said, everything underground?
That's why we're today, like as I said earlier today, once the CID board meets with the architectural firm will know what we need from our side, because quite frankly, it's a construction project. Once they get the wow factors, then they can start working with the actual developers, the construction
Okay.
folks,
Fair
to come
enough.
up with those dollar figures.
I believe that meeting starts at 1.
Right.
Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, it was from a financing perspective. So when we do the financing, that's where my perspective is coming from. We have to have that nailed down. So cost-benefit analysis and those kind of things are extremely helpful in getting the financing up and running and moving forward. So that's where I was coming from, because we just have to know. I know it sounds simplistic, but this is what this fund is paying for, this is what this fund's paying for, everybody agrees to it, and then we're going to go to the market, and we're going to nail it down, and we're going to kick it off and move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we won't have any of those I mean, I know this
Right.
meeting,
Yes.
today is going to discuss what's going to be put in before we can.
Yes.
Well,
Cost
and a lot of the
estimate.
meeting today too is to set this up so they know what CID, what city, and all
Yes.
that's to give Great River guidance on what they're going to have to work with
Yeah,
on different
yeah.
things.
Okay.
So I was just informing you of what we're doing and how we are moving forward, because I believe I'm on the agenda to talk about it, the CID board, so I wanted to make sure you all were aware of it first.
Yeah. And our community is
Yes.
really, really going to be watching what we do at this next attempt at our 76 project.
Sure. The second thing I wanted to talk, and I know we're running up against time, so I'm going to be very quick, but out of fairness to Chad, I wanted to let you know what he's kind of up against. He was approved, the IT department was approved for $302,000 of capital, and in that approval was several itemized capital projects for that. Well, one of the switches, and we just talked about this a little bit, so they came in, and the entire package for that's going to be about $325,000, and that's just one of his items. So I wanted for him to be able to say, okay, that $302,000 that he was approved for capital, if this is his priority, he might need to use that for one of those items to move that forward. And then knowing that we're going to have money in the internal service fund, and we can bring it back before you all as he needs to spend for some of those other priorities that he was approved. Because of what we're up against and the way you're only holding bids for 14 days and all of these things, this is just maybe new. I don't know that it's going to settle down, but it's new right now. So we've just got to figure out a way to help keep operations moving forward. So with that being said, I wanted to let you know that, the $302,000 was for all of that capital item, and unfortunately, one item is going to take up all of that. So what are your thoughts on, because it wouldn't necessarily be a budget amendment because it's all out of that same amount, can he just move forward with doing that one item, and then the internal service fund for the general fund is where he would be able to take out the rest. And that would require, I believe that would require a small budget amendment because there is an expense line item in the internal service fund, but just giving him a little bit of liberty to be able to do that because of what we're faced with, that would be.
And I know we're running late on time, but I just want to be very transparent with this. When we bid out these network switches, they did come in higher than we expected, but that's not the main reason for this increase in cost. The main reason is, during the budget time, it's months ago, right? And so at a high level, you look at things and say, we need X, Y, and Z. And then as the project gets approved, you dig into all the specific details. And some of those details, as we were digging into this, our cybersecurity advisors advised us to segment some sensitive things on our network. And I can't go into all the details publicly, right? But that's the cost in this. It's segmenting some sensitive items on our network to drastically increase our cybersecurity at the recommendation of that firm. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions or clarify things as best I can, but I wanted to be transparent. And it's not, although that's a factor, it did come in a little higher, that's not the primary reason of that large jump.
Fair enough. Boy, I'm sure leaning towards, we've approved the 302. Chad knows where the priorities need to be. As he works through his list, we're just giving a heads up that he'll need additional budget approval, and I'm all for that.
I would echo, having the knowledge of what Chad can't relay to you, I would say that this is a priority.
Yep.
And I would appreciate that.
So I'm hearing the board agreed. Would you like a motion? I mean, would you like us to vote on that, or just general consensus?
Just a general consensus, because it's already, the 302's already been approved. It's just, it was approved through a series of different items. If he could use that money to go towards this, it'd be
So why don't
helpful.
we quickly go down the line and just share your opinions?
So I'm 100% on board with that, knowing full well that we may have a further discussion at some point in
Thank
time
you.
to make up any differences.
I agree.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, the cybersecurity issue, that's big with everything right now, so yeah, most understandable.
Okay, so Chad, you good with that?
Thank you very much.
You bet.
That's all my report. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Are there any other brief comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, not- Thank you very much.